Let's have a look at the Guardian front page now, Roger. This is a little bit of navel-gazing.
Lorks lordy, this is the Guardian embarking upon an orgy of hand-wringing regarding its own founders' connections with the slave trade. It's a brilliant advertisement for the investigative journalism skills of the Guardian that it's taken them 150 years to uncover this. What can I say? Well done, them.
The beam in their own eye has been cast out, finally. Yeah. I mean, I suppose if we're to maintain any kind of ethical consistency, we should say, oh, you know, don't be contorted with guilt over something that last took place. But there is a certain amount of schadenfreude as well.
Well, yeah, the Guardian is constantly lecturing everyone else on racism and microaggressions and the terrible history of the British Empire and all the rest of it. And it turns out the whole time, not only were they founded by slave traders, people involved in the slave trade, but they were paid by the British government to end slavery. The Guardian's owners didn't want to end slavery, so they had to take money from the British taxpayer, and we only just finished paying that off, I think, in about 2014.
Yes.
We're talking hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Oh, the recompense to slave traders, not to slave traders, to slave owners was enormous, of course, and it came directly from government coffers.
Yeah.
Which was probably, you know, the best way to do it, in fact. I mean, given that it was they regarded it as an economic problem as much as, you know, we look back at it now as a purely moral one, and that's the way that history works, isn't it?
As with nationalisation, it comes from ultimately from the taxpayer. And the interesting thing about empire is individuals got rich, but countries didn't necessarily.
Yeah.
So, of course, the British taxpayer ended up paying for the military interventions and the security, but they didn't take the privatised profit.
Well, that was the thing, wasn't it? After the Second World War, what they said was that we could no longer afford to keep an empire, which does suggest that it wasn't actually just... I thought this empire was supposed to be running out of profit, but no.
Niall Ferguson points out that the richest countries in Europe, particularly the Scandinavian countries, weren't involved in empire, and the poorest countries in Europe, Spain and Portugal, very much were.
It was very much an evangelical mission, but we're destined to be misunderstood. I think the other interesting thing, they should look back not quite so far. I believe that the only reason the Guardian is even remotely financially viable is due to the sale of Auto Trader by its parent holding company. If I remember that correctly, despite their commitment to climate change.
Well, and also, I mean, capitalism saved, stopped slavery because there's no productivity increase. You can't invest in productivity increase with slavery. It's very much capped at what a human being can do.
I mean, people say, there are some people who try and whitewash the whole of the American Civil War and say, oh, it wasn't anything to do with slavery, it was to do with civil rights, states' rights and so on, and self-determination. But it is always more complex, and it was something to do with an appreciation of the fact that the economic policy of the whole of America seemed to be very much more driven by the industrialised North than the rural South, as they would say it rather. So these things are always slightly more complex. But anyway, well done, The Guardian, for owning up.